What's going on, everybody? My name is Ben, and welcome back to the bench for another episode of our Eduard 1/48 scale P-400. It has taken me about 4 or 5 weeks or so to actually get started on this kit, but that's what we're going to go ahead and do today. So let's go ahead and grab the box and let's dig in. But I'm actually very excited to go ahead and build this aircraft. I have been doing some research, I've been doing some reading, and I gotta tell you, this actually sounds like a really great little kit. We do have a lot of photo etch here, unfortunately, because I'm not a big fan of photo etch, but we do have some really interesting parts like the instrument panel that I want to go ahead and do in photo etch and see how that looks. Also, everything else though, I mean, it's a couple of levers here and there. I do have the photo etch seat belts as well. Maybe the inner door panel, I might want to go ahead and put that on as well, but we'll see once we get to that point. Now for paint, I did pick up this right here. This is actually a medium green from Mr. Color. Now I'm not sure how this stacks up, but it looks like most of the P400s and early P39s were painted in a bell green. It's just a green they used at the factory. So this is actually a pretty good representation, and all the internal parts would be painted in this color, like the seat and the floor and the door panels and all of that stuff. So we're gonna go ahead and use that at some point, but not today because I want to go ahead and get the cockpit built up and see how it goes. But anyway, let's go ahead and get started here on the first time lapse. I want to go ahead and start with the cockpit. We're going to get all the parts drilled out, like the bulkhead and all that, get things looking a little bit better, start getting this all assembled and see how it looks. So without further ado, let's start that time lapse. Let's have some fun. Alright everybody, so we went ahead and drilled out the bulkhead with a couple of different micro drill bits. I don't know how much of it you're actually going to be able to see once the canopy glazing is on and all that, but it does add a little bit of interest to it. So let's go ahead and just start installing some of these parts and pieces. I think I have to add a little bit of extra detailing. I was looking through some of my books and trying to figure out what we're missing, if anything really, here in the kit, and all we are missing is a couple of wires. Everything else looks pretty good. We might have to add in a couple of extra scratch built parts for little boxes and things, but for the most part, you have everything you need need here in plastic, and you can always add the photo etch to kind of elevate that detail just a little bit. Now, speaking of photo etch, there are some little levers and dials and switches and whatnot, and I really don't see myself using those. I might try a few here and there, but I don't think you're really going to be able to notice them. Now, as far as I know, the P-39s and the P-400s usually kept the left door closed. Pilots would get in and out of the right door. I don't remember where I read that, but I've read that somewhere, probably in one of my detail and scale books. I guess the reasoning behind that was there was a large throttle unit that kind of hung out into the doorway on the left side, so they would just find it easier to get in and out of the right side. So I actually might just keep the left door closed. So that would actually simplify things a great deal. That would of course require me to do a little bit more weathering there on the right side of the aircraft, but that should be okay. I gotta tell you, Eduard always surprises me with how well they can actually engineer kits, and they can get some parts out that just look fantastic. Now, I did mention that there's a couple of missing wires and details, and I've got my detail and scale book out here for the P-39, and we're gonna use the reference photos here as kind of a guide. I just wanna add in small things like some solder wire. I wanna add in maybe a little box on the side. This is gray box in this lower picture. That actually isn't in the model kit, so I might just scratch build that and add a couple of wires coming out of it like it shows here. The cockpit itself, yeah, it's busy, but there's not a lot of wires all over the sidewalls because there are no sidewalls. The sidewall is the door. You have a few underneath the door frame, but there's so little room between cockpit floor and that top of the door frame that there really isn't a lot of area that I can string a bunch of wires through. So we're just gonna go ahead and do maybe a couple. So let's go ahead and jump into our second time lapse, guys. This is where I really wanna go ahead and start doing some scratch building. I wanna do some wiring. I wanna kind of just play around with the awesome detail that's already here in the P-400 and just add a little bit extra. Luckily though, I've got great reference photos. They're not necessarily a P-400, they're actually a P-39, I believe, N, but you know, the idea is still the same. And I'm gonna have to take a little bit of artistic license here. I've got some 0.3mm solder. I've got some super glue. We're just going to go ahead and cut lengths of solder wire. We're going to bend them into shape. We're going to go ahead and add in a little bit of detail here, do some wire work. Nothing too crazy, nothing too fancy. Just a little bit to give this extra spice there in the cockpit. So onwards and upwards, guys, we're pushing on. This is a great model. Let's see what else we can do. And we are back. I gotta tell you, that was a lot of fun. I love adding in extra detailing like wiring or scratch built details. It's one thing about our hobby that I absolutely adore. So I was able to add in some wires and some scratch built boxes and whatnot. So I think it actually improved the level of detail just a little bit. Not that the detail level was all that bad, but I just wanted to add in my own personal flair. Now we're going to go ahead and move over to the instrument panel, which is all pure photo etch. That's going to be kind of tough. And to do that, we're going to be using some white school glue to go ahead and glue different parts and pieces down on top of the photo etch. It's not under any sort of load or stress, so I shouldn't have to worry about them falling off. It'll do the job just fine. So let's go ahead and jump in here to our next time lapse, and let's go ahead and build up the instrument panel, focusing on basically just the main portion of it. I might try a lever here or two, but we're not going to go crazy, guys. They want you to do some folding that I just don't really want to do. I'm going to try it, but more than likely I have another alternative. But let's jump into that next time lapse, guys, and build up the instrument panel, see what else we can do. Keep on pushing. Alright, so I went ahead and built up the instrument panel. We did add in some 3D details and we added in our gun sight. I'm going to walk you through it here. These right here, these little plastic gray parts are actually from the kit plastic instrument panel. I went ahead and I cut that apart because the kit part itself, the PE, is totally flat. They also wanted you to build up these boxy rectangles to act as an additional section for those guns. I don't want to do that. I folded one and it was such a pain. I decided, let's not do that. Let's just go ahead and use some plastic. So I cut out the gun breeches from the actual kit part and I went ahead and glued them down on top of the photo edge. And that actually has worked really, really well. It adds a bit more 3D detail. It has a bit more life to it. So I'm happy with that. Also for the gun sight, there was a giant triangle of plastic, completely thick. I cut that off and we're going to add in a little bit later a little thin piece of plastic card. So I think we're on the right track, guys, for sure. But let's go ahead and jump into our last time lapse. It's time to go ahead and do some priming. And I'm going to grab some black Stano-Res primer and we're going to go ahead and get this thing all ready for next episode where I hope to paint and get some color on plastic. Alright everybody, we are back, and as you can see, the P-400 is looking pretty snazzy. We've got everything overcoated with a nice coat of black Styrene primer. Looking great, very smooth. It's going to take paint, I think, excellently. We also went ahead and worked, of course, on the instrument panel. I do have to come back and brush paint some of those parts, but we'll do that next episode. And I think, yeah, we're pretty good for today. Next time I'll come back and I'm going to go ahead and mess around with some of this medium green to go ahead and start shading in and getting this thing looking a little bit better. So far, I'm really enjoying this model. I did add some wires and whatnot, but I don't really think it needs a lot of extra detailing. The photo etch parts though, guys, really do add quite a bit of detail, but the problem is they're so tiny, I don't know how much I'm actually going to be able to see. So I might actually just stick with the big stuff, but that's okay. We're going to go ahead and jump back in next episode. We'll get onto the paint, see what we can do with that, and just fingers crossed this turns out. So until our next episode, guys, you know the drill. Go out there, get yourself some bench time, have some fun, build something cool, and we'll see you back here on the next episode of Ben Builds for more of the Eduard 1/48 scale P400. Thanks so much, everybody. Take care, and we'll see you soon.